Chapter 8. Holt, Gillen and Maddie stood in the weapons practice yard of the Araluen Battle School. For the purposes of this demonstration, Holt had requested that Horace and Cassandra stay away. He knew there was friction between the girl and her parents, and he didn't want that to interfere with her concentration. Maddie looked curiously at Holt. She wasn't sure what was going on, but she'd watched him set 2 old jousting helmets on posts about 70 meters from where they stood. He smiled at her. "Gillen is interested in a potential new weapon for the Corps," he told her. "I thought you might be the best person to demonstrate it." "You mean the sling," she said, glancing down at the double leather thongs in her right hand. When he had arranged her temporary release from detention, Holt had asked her to bring her sling and a supply of the ammunition she used. "Exactly. Now, Gillen, would you agree that this would seem to be the optimum range for shooting at an armoured man?" Gillen nodded. The longbow could shoot much further than 70 meters, of course, but at this range it would still have the power and hitting force to send an arrow smashing through an enemy's steel helmet. And if the shooter missed, there would still be time for another shot. Not that rangers often missed, if ever. "Then let's see you do it," Holt said to Gillen. Gillen raised his bow, and with a smooth, automatic action that came from years of practice, brought an arrow from the quiver over his shoulder and laid it on the string. Without seeming to take aim, he drew back and shot. They heard the resounding clang as the arrow hit the left-hand helmet, punching through the steel at what would be forehead level. The helmet leapt and spun off the post, transfixed by the arrow, and rolled in the dust of the practice yard. "Slow," said Holt. Gillen turned a pained eye on him. "I'd like to see you do better," he challenged. Holt allowed himself a faint smile. "Unfortunately, I've left my bow in our apartment," he said, and Gillen sniffed. Holt glanced at Maddie. "So we'll leave the second target to you, my lady." Maddie slipped the loop at one end of the sling around the middle finger of her right hand, then gripped the plaited end of the other thong between her thumb and forefinger. As she did this, she took a lead shot from the pouch at her belt and fitted it into the leather patch in the middle of the sling. Holt noted with approval that she did so without looking. Her eyes, slightly narrowed, were focused on the helmet at the far end of the practice yard. She turned side-on, advancing her left leg towards the target, and let the shot dangle behind her body at the end of the 2 thongs. She swung the sling in a slow pendulum motion several times, making sure the shot was firmly settled in its pouch. She pointed her left arm and hand towards the target, then whipped her right arm up in an overhand throwing action, her arm moving in a rapid arc about 20 degrees from the vertical and her body following through on the cast. As she reached the point of release, she let go the knotted end from between her thumb and forefinger. The shot flew out of the sling, the power of her throw magnified several times by the extra length and leverage that it added to the action. Clang! The second helmet spun crazily on the pole, then came to a rest on a drunken angle. Gillen nodded, impressed. Not bad. He led the way down the practice yard to examine the result of her throw. There was an enormous dent in the helmet, also at forehead height. Some traces of bright silver metal were sprayed across the steel. "Didn't penetrate," he said, chewing his lip thoughtfully. Holt touched the massive dent in the helmet. "No, but would you care to have your head inside that helmet when this happened?" "It definitely wouldn't do the wearer a lot of good," Gillen conceded. He rubbed his finger on the splash of silver metal. "What are you using as ammunition?" he asked. Maddie took another projectile from the pouch at her belt and handed it to him. Gillen was momentarily surprised at the weight. "Lead shot," she said. "That seems to do the trick." He held out his hand and she passed him the sling. He examined it. "So simple," he said, "and so deadly." He handed it back. "You use a different technique to your mother. I seem to recall that she spun it round and round, horizontally." He demonstrated, waving his right hand above his head in a flat circle. Maddie shrugged disparagingly. "Not a good technique," she said. "I don't know how she ever hit anything. It's so hard to judge when you're spinning it horizontally." "Oh, she hit plenty of things," Holt told her, "but she had to practice for hours to get any sort of accuracy." "This is more efficient," Maddie said. "And besides, if you stand up whirling the sling around your head 2 or 3 times, you're making a target of yourself." "Good point," Holt conceded. "How many shots can you get away in a minute?" Maddie pushed out her bottom lip uncertainly. "I have no idea," she said. "I've never timed myself." "Then let's see, shall we?" Holt told her. He stopped and picked up the helmet Gillen had shot, pulling the arrow loose and returning it to the Ranger Commandant. Then he replaced the helmet on its post and gestured for Maddie to return to the shooting line. "All right, alternate between the two and we'll see how fast you are," he told her. "But remember, fast is no good if you aren't accurate. If you've got a big nasty Iberian pirate coming at you with a cutlass, it's no good missing him 5 times in rapid succession. Better to hit him once, slowly." She smiled at him. Point taken. She set her feet, reached into the ammunition pouch, and loaded a shot into the sling. Once again, she let it swing slowly back and forth for a few seconds. "Begin!" Holt called. Gillen's lips moved as he began silently counting off the seconds. She let fly with the shot, and, before it struck the target, she was loading another into the sling. This time, she didn't bother with those short preliminary swings, but brought her arm up and over almost immediately. As she released, they heard the clang of her first shot hitting home. Then she was reloading and snapping her arm up and over once more, aiming at the first target again. Clang! 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 "Stop shooting!" Holt called as Gillen threw up his hand. She had managed to get 6 shots away in the minute he had counted to himself, although the 4th projectile had missed its target. 5 out of 6, he commented thoughtfully. Not bad at all. Maddie turned and confronted the 2 rangers, her feet set apart, her hands on her hips. "Care to tell me what this is all about?" she challenged, looking from one to the other. As Holt opened his mouth to reply, she waved a hand to stop him. "And don't tell me some fairy story about Gillen assessing the sling as a new weapon. If you were merely interested in the sling, why would you care about how fast I can shoot?" Gillen and Holt exchanged a quick look. It wasn't wasted on Maddie. But neither said anything. "It's pretty obvious that you're testing me, not the weapon. The question is, why?" "Maybe that's something your parents should discuss with you," Holt said finally. Maddie sighed deeply. "Mum and Dad, all they're interested in is keeping me cooped up. You know I'm confined to quarters for another week, don't you?" A smile touched the corners of Holt's mouth. "I'd heard some rumour to that effect. And, of course, there's no good reason why they've done that, is there?" Maddie rolled her eyes and sighed resignedly. "Oh, all right. Maybe I did sneak out and go hunting once or twice." Holt raised an eyebrow, and she amended the statement. 5 or 6 times then, and maybe I was just a little cheeky when they talked to me about it." The eyebrow, which had just returned to its normal position, went up again. "All right, maybe I was a little more than that," she admitted. "They're only doing what they think is best for you, Maddie," Holt told her gently. She dropped her eyes and scuffed her boot in the sand of the practice yard. "I know," she said unhappily, "but do they have to treat me like a precious princess all the time?" "Well, you are a princess, and you are precious to them," Holt said, "and to all of us, as a matter of fact." He liked Maddie. Over the years, they had formed a close bond. Gillen was aware of this. That's why he had decided to stay out of this discussion and leave it to Holt. In spite of herself, Maddie smiled faintly. "You always manage to tie me up in knots." Holt took her hand. "All I'm saying is that they care about you. They don't mean to be so overprotective, but it's hard for them to let go of the reins. They know it too. But believe me, they are trying, and they've had an idea." "Which you won't tell me about." "No, it's not up to me to do that. You should hear it from them." Maddie took a deep breath. "Then let's go back to the keep and they can tell me," she said, "assuming I passed whatever test you just set me." Holt looked at Gillen. "I think she passed, don't you?" Gillen smiled at the young princess. "Oh yes, I think so."